After years of investment from my company, my boyfriend finally broke into show business. At last, he won an Oscar. True to his promise, he married me. Then, during a backstage interview, he said, "It was transactional. I had to marry her in exchange for the funding." His brain-dead fans came after me soon afterward. They stalked me and one day, poured sulfuric acid over my face. The attack left me disfigured. He sent me to the hospital, but that was just another part of his scheme. Before long, the world believed I had died from complications. When I returned to life, I decided to invest in someone else. After all, he was the only person who had mourned my death and given me a proper burial. Emil Brando thanked everyone on stage the night he accepted his award. Everyone except me, his agent, whose investment had paved the way for him to become the Academy's Best Actor. I stared at the familiar backdrop before me and the list of nominees. Overcome by a stunned sense of déjà vu. Had God pitied me so deeply that he had brought me back to this moment in time? I watched Emil accept his Oscar, step off the stage, and return calmly to his seat beside me. He paused for a moment before turning to embrace the actress he was rumored to be dating. The crowd erupted into screams of excitement. Fellow actors and guests watched with morbid fascination. His assistant, who knew about our relationship, shot me a wary glance, expecting me to lose control right then and there. I laughed through my tears. I had promised him that as soon as he won an Oscar, he would marry me. Back when he was a complete unknown, Emil had agreed without a second thought. He had taken my hand and told me that even if he never won the award, I was the only woman he would ever marry. He had worried that my parents would disapprove of him for being an ordinary man, so he resolved to work harder and harder until he became successful enough to stand as my equal. He had been determined to make me the happiest bride in the world. But when the day finally came and he won an Oscar, he fulfilled that promise with a heart full of resentment. He continued taking on role after role until his schedule became so packed that we never even had a honeymoon. With every phone call, he grew more impatient and less willing to talk. Then came the interview where he admitted that our marriage had been nothing more than a transactional exchange for my investment in his career. His popularity soared after winning the award. Emil's fans often imagined themselves as his wife, so they saw me, the woman who actually married him and who had been born into wealth, as their rival and nemesis. They quickly organized a hate campaign against me online. Before long, they had even turned my name into a meme. I already knew that celebrity fans could be dangerously obsessive, but I never expected to be doxxed, stalked, and eventually attacked with sulfuric acid outside my own home. By the time I reached the hospital, my face had been damaged beyond repair. My life itself hung in the balance. Emil came to the hospital while the doctors were fighting to save me. I assumed he had come because he cared, because he wanted to be there when I needed love and support during the darkest moment of my life. I was wrong. "I don't need you anymore, Bet," he said coldly, looking down at me from beside my hospital bed. "I have a brighter future ahead of me, but I can't walk that path with you holding me back." He went on about how his fans had discovered our marriage after he became an Academy Award-winning actor. "I've built my reputation around my life as an actor. I'm supposed to be the underdog, the grassroots performer who pulled himself up by his bootstraps until he reached the pinnacle of an acting career. I've sacrificed too much to maintain that image, which is why you've become a problem. If people found out you were the one financing my career all this time, and that I only made it because I relied on your money like some sugar baby, then no one would see my Oscar as something I truly earned. At that rate, many of my fans would leave the fandom, and my haters would attack me even more relentlessly. Everything I've worked so hard to achieve would be destroyed. I don't want to lose any of this, Bet. I'm gonna need you to do this for me one last time." He bribed the doctor on duty to remove my respirator during the operation. I died in agony. After my death became public, Emil put his Oscar-worthy acting skills on full display and cried like the tragic hero of a heartbreaking drama. His fans claimed they had never seen a man with such profound emotion and devotion, which only made them adore him even more. Overnight, every doubt about his legitimacy vanished, replaced by sympathy and even stronger public support. His fame reached new heights. His agency was ecstatic and booked him for more interviews, talk shows, and God knows what else. One collaboration followed another, along with one endorsement after another. He had found an endless stream of money, and he reveled in it. Now that the public's attention had shifted completely away from me, he forgot all about my corpse. Had it not been for a certain someone, my body would never have received a proper burial. The thought of that man's handsome face suddenly made me want to leave. While Emil continued putting on a spectacle for the media and his fans, I rose to my feet and headed for the exit. He noticed me leaving and assumed I was jealous because he had embraced the actress. Irritation flashed across his face, and he immediately sent me a series of text messages. "Emil, what the hell? Leaving in the middle of the ceremony? Why? Because I was pretending to have a thing with an actress? Grow up already. It's showbiz. I'm doing this for the attention." "Emil, or were you upset that I didn't mention your name in my speech? If that's the reason, then I don't even know what to say to you. I thought we were past that kind of dramatic, performative display of affection. Emil. Other people might make up stories about me and Helena, but you of all people should know there's nothing between us. Come on. Emil. This is the day I win an Oscar. You know how much this means to me. So stop being a bitch on the most important day of my life. Wow. He was already that quick to resort to insults and verbal abuse. My only response was to block his number and look for the young man who had retrieved my body. I remembered him as an unknown actor who kept getting sidelined by the company for being too honest and straightforward. He had been acting professionally for 3 years and still hadn't gained any recognition. I knew who he was though. He frequently appeared in the same productions as Emil. He was always the unnamed extra while Emil played the lead. Whenever I visited the set, Emil was always too busy for me. He all but ignored me because he had countless scenes to film, and he rarely even bothered to greet me. On the other hand, that young man would always bring me something warm to drink while I waited. Sometimes he would chat with me for a while. Other times, he would simply greet me before returning to work. He never once made me feel uncomfortable or overstepped any boundaries. I still didn't know why he had cared enough to give me a proper burial. Maybe he was simply that kind. Maybe he felt sorry for someone he at least knew in passing. Or maybe it was because I would never know, would I? What I did know was that, with my second chance at life, I was going to spend my money on someone else. Miss Colbert. I looked up. The young man who had occupied my thoughts stood before me, his lanky frame wrapped in a thick black parka. He looked at me with gentle eyes. I remembered the expression on his face when he retrieved my corpse. He had been crying. His eyes had been red, and his entire body had trembled. A lump suddenly rose in my throat. What are you doing here? I asked. My agent told me to experience the vibe of the Academy Awards. From here, he replied with an embarrassed smile. That was a lie. He had come to make himself a little more visible, hoping some of the attention surrounding the red carpet might spill over onto him. Unfortunately, he hadn't been formally invited, so he didn't have a seat inside. Once the red carpet festivities ended, all he could do was remain outside. I smiled and stepped toward him. Come on. You're not gonna experience much of the vibe from out here. Let's get you inside. He stared at me in disbelief. I'd be honored. Leading the young man back into the event caused quite a stir. Attention shifted toward us from every direction, but I ignored it. The young man also seemed focused only on me, paying everyone else no mind. Emil glared from his seat as he furiously fired off texts. Emil, what the fuck are you doing? Emil, you think you can get under my skin just by bringing some random NPC with you? Emil, do you still want me to marry you or not? Because you're shooting your fucking self in the foot. A faint smirk tugged at my lips for a brief moment. He caught my eye and froze before his expression darkened even further. Miss Colbert, a little bird told us you came here to celebrate our best actor's achievements this year. He seems to be taking home quite a few awards tonight. Is there anything you'd like to say about that? Perhaps a word of congratulations? The MC asked. I smiled. Oh, then I guess the little bird got it wrong. I came here for this young man beside me. Not him. The crowd gasped. Everyone in the industry knew I was the deep pocket bankrolling Emil's career. His achievements were only possible because of my money. That meant we had some kind of special connection. The fact that I was dressed even more lavishly than several actresses, despite not being one myself, only reinforced the assumption that I was here to celebrate Emil's success. I gestured toward the young man beside me. He accepted the attention with poise and grace. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ash Olivier. I'm very honored to be here. Ash is a very promising artist, I can tell you that. If any writer or director has an interesting project and is looking for fresh talent, give him a chance. I'm sure you'll be very surprised, I said. The gossip grew louder as people darted their eyes between me and Emil. Is she kicking Emil to the curb? I mean, Emil and Bet are supposed to be practically engaged. But he didn't mention her in his acceptance speech at all. Then he hugged the actress he's rumored to be dating. This new guy looks like the next internet dreamboat, y'all. Next best actor, anyone? Bet really knows how to pick the right men, huh? Oh, someone's suffering the consequences of being an idiot. If I were him, I'd have done everything I could to treasure Bet. Some people think they've got it all made just because they won an award. Oofed. Let's see how long he stays afloat without her. Fans might be willfully ignorant, fiercely loyal to their chosen idols, and ready to wage a holy war for them, but people in the industry were far more pragmatic. In Hollywood, connections were everything. Knowing the right person opened more doors than popularity ever could. And no one with half a brain and any ambition would piss off their financier. Emil had it too good. I cultivated the connections for him, so he never had to humble himself or endure the humiliating grind of chasing roles. Eventually, he started believing his success came entirely from his own effort. Why was he the best actor at all? Hollywood was saturated with actors, many of whom were genuinely more talented than he was. Many worked harder. Plenty were even more physically attractive. His fame and adoring fans had deluded him. He believed the fantasy they built around him. He had lost sight of reality. Aren't you a close friend, let's call it that for now, of Mr. Brando? The MC followed up, clearly hoping to stir up more drama. Surely a friend would have prepared a congratulatory speech, right? The camera panned to Emil and his glowering face. I grinned. I'm the producer behind many of Mr. Brando's projects over the years, so yes. Of course I'm happy he made it this far. Congratulations. I hope he keeps winning awards like these every year so he can relive this moment again and again. Emil stared at me. Something about this felt off to him. I had arrived with a complete unknown, introduced him to the entire audience before acknowledging Emil, and only then offered my congratulations. It came across as more than a little passive-aggressive. The MC forced a laugh and quickly changed the subject. That evening, after the post-ceremony banquet ended, Emil blocked my path. What was the point of all that? It's like you're trying to make me hate you, he growled under his breath, careful not to let anyone overhear us. I shrugged off his hand and raised my voice. Mr. Brando, you're making me uncomfortable. Just because I'm not producing your next movie doesn't mean you're allowed to harass me over it, right? People turned and shot him knowing looks. Wait, didn't he just win an Oscar? Since when does an Oscar-winning actor struggle to find investors? Ooh, the dude's worried. He knows Betty's got a new artist to back. Damn, harassing a young woman over money? Do artists really have no class anymore? It's her choice what she wants to produce and what she wants to drop. Nah, man. He just realized he's being dropped. Of course he's panicking. He wouldn't be here without Bet. His face went pale. He heard every word. I told you we'd get married after I won an Oscar, and I intend to keep that promise. So why the hell are you making this so damn difficult? You don't want me as your husband anymore, do you? He demanded. It was straight out of his playbook. He always framed marrying me as some monumental sacrifice on his part while conveniently ignoring everything I had sacrificed for him. Back then, I believed his determination to marry me even after he became famous proved his feelings were genuine. That illusion shattered the moment I discovered he had encouraged his fans to harass me online. After quietly approving those attacks, he went on to inherit my wealth and used my death to attract even more media attention. Any patience he showed me now came with an ulterior motive. He was looking for a way to replace me at the top of the industry's hierarchy. The more I thought about it, the more I despised him. I doubted I was doing a very good job hiding it, either. I cupped a hand over my mouth in feigned shock and took a step back. Mr. Brando, I think you've misunderstood me. I invested in your projects and produced your work because I believed in your potential. I was never interested in you as a person, especially not romantically. Please don't make this any harder for either of us. Cameras shot into the air. I had successfully drawn the crowd's attention, and whispers spread through the room. Emil's expression darkened with rage. He grabbed my wrist and tried to drag me away. You're coming with me. I screamed, stop. What are you doing? Let go of me. Luckily, Ash came to my rescue. Mr. Brando, please. Be mindful of all the attention you're attracting right now. I don't think you'd want ugly headlines about what you're about to do to Miss Colbert, would you? Emil looked Ash up and down before glaring at me. I don't know what game you're playing, Bet, but pissing me off isn't going to end well for you. He flung my hand aside, straightened his clothes, and stalked off like a sore loser. I watched him slink away and almost laughed at his empty threat. In my previous life, I had done everything I could to mold him into the industry's golden star. I worried constantly about him suffering even the smallest setback, so I gave him the very best opportunities one could secure. He won an Oscar because of everything I had done for him, and how did he repay me? The moment he accepted that award, I was willing to bet he had already started planning how to squeeze every last thing he could out of me, including my life, to build an even more profitable future for himself. Ash looked at me with concern. Are you alright? A camera flashed. I closed my eyes, put on a frightened expression, and gave a small wave. I'm okay. Asha. I'm okay. When I opened my eyes again, they were glistening with tears. Ash looked genuinely upset. Ignoring the journalists eager to question us, he escorted me out of the hall immediately. By 6 o'clock the following morning, the front page of every major entertainment trade in the country featured the exact same photograph. It was a high-resolution, long-lens shot of the post-Oscar banquet exit. In the center was Emil Brando, his newly won gold statuette sticking out of his coat pocket, his face contorted in a dark, aggressive sneer as his fingers clamped around my wrist. Opposite him, wrapped in a thick black parka, was Ash Olivier, stepping firmly between us, his posture steady and protective. The headline on Variety read, Golden Boy or Gold Digger? Oscar winner Brando clashes with benefactor Bet Colbert. Below it, The Hollywood Reporter ran an even more devastating subheadline. Colbert drops Brando's future slate, introduces new protégé Ash Olivier. Inside my penthouse suite overlooking Beverly Hills, the morning sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I sat on a plush velvet sofa, holding a warm cup of black coffee, while my head of communications, Victoria, set a thick stack of press reports on the glass table. Emil's PR team has been calling every 10 minutes since 4 a.m., Victoria said, a sharp, professional smile touching her lips. They tried to claim you were overwhelmed by emotion, and that Emil was simply trying to guide you to a private vehicle for your safety. And I took a quiet sip of coffee, and we released the security audio from the corridor, Victoria replied smoothly. The part where he yelled, "Pissing me off isn't going to end well for you," is currently trending #1 worldwide on X. I smiled faintly. In my previous life, I had spent 5 years shielding Emil from every negative headline. Whenever he threw a tantrum on set, I bribed the crew to keep quiet. Whenever he insulted a director, I personally bought the film's distribution rights to ensure he didn't get blacklisted. I had built a sterile, golden bubble around him, allowing him to believe he was a saint. Without that bubble, the world was finally seeing the man behind the gold paint. "Where is Ash?" I asked. "He's in the kitchen with your chef," Victoria chuckled softly, her eyes softening. "He refused to sit in the living room because he thought he'd track dust onto your rugs. The boy's been up since dawn reading the scripts you sent." I set my teacup down, stood up, and walked toward the kitchen. Ash was sitting at the marble island, wearing a simple gray hoodie and jeans. His long legs were tucked awkwardly under the stool, his dark hair messy, his brow furrowed as he scribbled notes on a thick script margin with a red pen. "Which one are you reading?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Ash jumped slightly, turning around so fast he nearly knocked over his water glass. "Miss Colbert, I'm reading The Last Horizon, the indie script about the radio operator in 1940s Maine." "You like it?" "It's breathtaking," Ash said, his eyes shining with pure, unadulterated passion. "The character isn't flashy. He doesn't have big monologues. But every scene relies on subtext, quiet choices, and genuine human isolation. It's the kind of script actors dream about." I looked at his earnest, glowing face. In my past life, Emil had thrown that exact script into the trash, calling it art house garbage that doesn't pay enough. He had demanded blockbusters with explosions and CGI so he could sell more merchandise. "Then it's yours," I said softly. "We start principal photography in 6 weeks. I'm producing it myself." Ash stared at me, his fingers tightening around his red pen, his mouth opening and closing in utter disbelief. "Miss Colbert, this is a $30 million production. I've only ever played body number 2 and uncredited guard. You are Ash Olivier." I stepped closer, looking directly into his clear, honest eyes. "And in 2 years, you are going to make people forget Emil Brando ever existed." Ash's eyes grew red around the rims. He swallowed hard, leaning his head down, his voice raspy with emotion. "I won't let you down. I swear on my life I won't let you down." While Ash was preparing for his first starring role, Emil Brando's golden world was beginning to crack. At the headquarters of his talent agency, the atmosphere was chaotic. Emil sat in a leather armchair, slamming his fist onto the mahogany desk of his senior agent, Marcus. "Why haven't the luxury endorsement contracts been signed yet? Rolex promised a 5-year deal if I won the Oscar." Marcus rubbed his temples, looking at Emil with deep, exhausted frustration. "Rolex froze the negotiations 2 hours ago, Emil. They saw the video of you grabbing Bette Colbert in the hallway. Their brand compliance team declared you a reputational liability until the Colbert dispute is resolved." "A liability?" Emil shrieked, springing from his chair, his face contorted in anger. "I am the best actor in the world. Bette Colbert is just a rich girl playing producer. She'll crawl back to me in a week. She always does." "She dropped your next 3 films, Emil," Marcus snapped, tossing a stack of legal termination notices onto the desk. "She withdrew the $30 million completion bond for The Sovereign. Without her money, the studio canceled the project this morning. They're recasting your role." Emil's breath hitched in his throat. His face went pale. They can't do that. She owns the intellectual property, Emil. She bought it 3 years ago." Marcus stood up, leaning over the desk. "You thought you were a god because you won a gold statuette. You forgot that Bette Colbert bought the pedestal you were standing on." Just then the office door clicked open. Helena, the actress Emil had embraced on live television the night of the ceremony, walked in. She was wearing sunglasses and a silk scarf, carrying a designer handbag. "Marcus," Helena said coldly, ignoring Emil entirely. "My manager told me to come pull my name from the joint PR campaign with Emil. My team doesn't want me associated with a domestic harassment scandal." Emil stared at her in utter shock. "Helena, what are you talking about? We were going to announce our relationship next month to boost our social media metrics." Helena turned her head, looking at Emil through her dark lenses with an expression of pure, unadulterated contempt. That was when you had the Colbert fortune backing your projects, Emil, Helena sneered, pulling her gloves tight. Without Bet, you're just another insecure actor with an ego too big for his bank account. Good luck paying your mortgage on the Bel Air mansion. She turned on her high heels and walked out, her footsteps echoing sharply down the corridor. Emil stood frozen in the middle of the room, his fist shaking violently. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He snatched it out, expecting an apology text from me. Instead, it was a notification from the primary forum of his diehard fan club, Brando's Angels. The top post had over 50,000 likes, written by the head administrator, a woman named Sarah. Our king is being attacked by that wealthy witch Bet Colbert. She's using her money to ruin his career because he refused to be her pet. We need to protect Emil. Let's show Bet Colbert what happens when she messes with a real fandom. Below the post, thousands of comments were filled with vile insults, private home addresses, and threats of physical violence directed at me. Emil looked at the screen. A dark, sinister smile slowly spread across his face. He didn't delete the post. He didn't issue a statement telling his fans to stand down. Instead, he opened a private messaging app, typed a short message to the fan club administrator, and hit send. Thank you for always standing by me, Sarah. She's ruining my life. I don't know how much more of this I can take. In his mind, he had used this tactic dozens of times in the past. Whenever a critic wrote a bad review, he dropped subtle hints to his fans, and within 24 hours, the critic was swarmed, threatened, and forced to delete their account. He believed that if Bet Colbert was terrified enough, if she suffered enough public terror, she would eventually run back into his arms begging for protection. He didn't realize that I was no longer his victim. I was his executioner. 2 weeks into pre-production for The Last Horizon, I drove with Ash to an old coastal town 3 hours north of Los Angeles to inspect the filming locations. The weather was crisp, the ocean waves crashing loudly against the rocky cliffs below. After touring a lighthouse that would serve as the main set, Ash and I walked along the wooden pier, holding cups of hot coffee. Miss Colbert, Ash said quietly, looking out at the gray ocean horizon. Can I ask you a question? Go ahead. Why me? He turned his head, his dark eyes looking at me with genuine, quiet vulnerability. There are 100 established actors in town who would have begged for this role. Why did you pull an extra off the pavement and give him everything? I stopped walking, resting my hands on the wooden railing of the pier, the wind blowing strands of dark hair across my face. In my past life, I had asked myself the exact same question. When I was lying on that cold operating table, my face destroyed by acid, my breath failing as the bribed doctor removed my respirator. When my body was tossed into a county morgue as an unclaimed industrial accident. It was Ash who had walked into that cold room. He hadn't been a famous actor. He hadn't been a rich man. He had spent his entire life savings, $4,000 he had earned from working 3 retail jobs, to buy a private plot in a quiet garden cemetery, buying fresh white lilies, standing in the rain for 3 hours as my casket was lowered into the earth. He was the only person in the entire world who had wept for Bet Colbert. Ash. I turned to look at him, my voice soft and steady. Do you remember 6 years ago? At the Paramount backlit? A rainy Tuesday afternoon? Ash blinked, startled. 6 years ago? An old stuntman collapsed near the soundstage during a rain scene, I said quietly. Everyone walked past him because they thought he was just an extra. Taking on up. But a 19-year-old boy in a muddy coat ran over, pulled off his own jacket to cover the old man, and carried him on his back 2 miles to the clinic because the studio ambulance was reserved for the lead actors. Ash's eyes widened in sudden, absolute shock. You were there. I was sitting in my car, waiting for Emil to finish his 10-minute cameo. I smiled, a small, genuine warmth touching my eyes. I saw that boy. I saw him stand in the rain for 2 hours outside the clinic to make sure the stuntman's family arrived. I reached out, gently patting his shoulder. I didn't pick you because of luck, Ash. I picked you because in a city built on fake gold, you are the only real thing I've ever found. Ash stood on the windy pier, his eyes growing red, his chest heaving as he swallowed back tears. He looked at me not with the pathetic, transactional obsession Emil had shown, but with a deep, unshakable devotion. I will give you everything I have, Bet, he whispered, using my first name. For the very first time. I swear it. While Ash and I were building a masterpiece on the coast, the toxic rot of Emil, Brando's fanbase was reaching a boiling point. Driven by Emil's subtle online cues and financial backing secretly funneled through his assistant, the administrator of Brando's Angels, Sarah, had organized a group of 4 extremist fans. They bought dark hoodies, industrial gloves, and 2 glass bottles of concentrated, technical-grade sulfuric acid from an unlicensed chemical supplier. In the valley, it was the exact same weapon, the exact same method, and the exact same hatred that had ended my previous life. On a rainy Thursday evening, I returned to my Beverly Hills penthouse after a late-budget meeting with the studio distribution team. My private security detail, 4 former elite federal operatives I had hired the day I returned to this life, sat in a dark SUV parked 50 yards behind my car. As my Mercedes pulled into the subterranean garage of the high-rise building, the overhead lights flickered slightly. I stepped out of the vehicle, holding my leather briefcase. From behind the concrete support pillars near the utility entrance, 3 figures dressed in black raincoats stepped out, their faces covered by dark gaiters. The leader, a young woman with wild, bloodshot eyes holding a heavy glass jar wrapped in industrial tape, stepped forward. It was Sarah. Bet Colbert. Sarah shrieked, her voice echoing violently through the hollow. Concrete garage. You ruined Emil's career. You think your rich family can buy the world? We're going to make sure no man ever looks at your face again. She raised the glass jar, preparing to hurl the clear, lethal liquid directly at my face. In my past life, this moment had been filled with blinding terror, pain, and the smell of melting skin. In this life, I didn't even flinch. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I stood gracefully beside my car, pulled out a small electronic remote from my pocket, and pressed the central button. Click. The garage's blinding halogen floodlights snapped on simultaneously from 6 angles, illuminating every corner of the concrete floor like a stadium stage. Police, don't move. 4 heavy steel security grills slammed down over the garage exits, sealing the space entirely. From behind the concrete pillars, 6 armed SWAT officers and my private security team stepped out, laser sights painted directly onto the 3 attackers' chests. A secondary door opened, and a team of federal prosecutors alongside 2 news cameras from NBC stepped into the light, recording every single frame in high-definition 4K. Sarah's eyes went wide with sheer, unadulterated terror. The glass jar slipped from her trembling rubber gloves, crashing onto the concrete floor. Hiss. The acid hit the concrete, instantly burning a white, smoking hole through the seal coat, filling the garage with a foul, acrid chemical stench. Drop to the ground. Hands behind your head, the lead officer bellowed. The 3 fanatics dropped to their knees, weeping and screaming in terror as officers slammed them onto the concrete, clicking iron handcuffs onto their wrists. I walked slowly toward Sarah, my heels clicking sharply against the concrete, stopping 2 feet away from her kneeling, trembling form. Sarah, I said, my voice cool, elegant, and entirely unbothered. Did Emil tell you that if you did this, he'd marry you? Sarah gasped, tears smearing her face. He loves us. He told us you were a monster. I pulled out a small tablet and played an audio file recorded 3 hours ago by federal wiretaps on Emil's private line. Emil's voice echoed clearly through the garage speakers. Is the girl Sarah handling it? Good. Tell her that if she scares Bet enough, I'll give her a private backstage pass next month. If she gets caught, make sure she tells the police she acted alone. I don't know the crazy bitch. Sarah's brain short-circuited. She stared at the tablet, her face turning from pale to a dark, ghastly gray, her mouth hanging open in utter devastation. He called me a crazy bitch, she whimpered, her body shivering uncontrollably. Take them away, I instructed the lead prosecutor, and release the full wiretap audio to every major network in 20 minutes. The fallout from the garage ambush was an atomic bomb that flattened Emil Brando's life in less than 12 hours. By midnight, the NBC News special aired nationwide. Oscar winner Emil Brando arrested for conspiracy to commit severe chemical assault. The wiretap audio, the chemical purchase receipts funded by Emil's assistants, corporate account, and the live video of the ambush were broadcast to over 80 million households. The public reaction was a wave of pure, absolute revulsion. His diehard fan club dissolved overnight. The very fans who had once waged war for him tore down his posters, burned his merchandise, and demanded he be given the maximum prison sentence. The Academy held an emergency board meeting at 2 a.m. For the first time in history, they voted unanimously to permanently revoke an Academy Award, demanding the return of his Oscar statuette within 24 hours. At 6 a.m., federal agents kicked open the doors of Emil's Bel Air mansion. He was dragged out into the rainy morning in his silk pajamas, his hands cuffed behind his back, as 50 news cameras recorded his hollow, tear-stained face. For the morning news. 3 months later, the high-profile trial concluded at the Los Angeles Superior Court. I sat in the front row of the public gallery, wearing a tailored navy suit, flanked by my legal team and Ash. In the defendant's box sat Emil Brando. He looked like a corpse. His hair was shaved, his skin yellowed, his gaunt face covered in hollow lines. He had lost 40 pounds, his hands shaking constantly under his iron shackles. When the judge read the final verdict, every head in the courtroom turned toward him. Emil Brando, the judge announced, her voice cold as iron. For the charges of conspiracy to commit severe bodily harm with a deadly chemical agent, solicitation of a felony, and corporate fraud, you are hereby sentenced to 22 years in state penitentiary without the possibility of parole. Emil let out a high-pitched, breathless shriek, collapsing onto the defense table, weeping hysterically, his forehead slamming against the wood. He raised his head, his bloodshot eyes searching the gallery until they locked onto me. Bet. Emil screamed, his voice tearing as bailiffs grabbed his arms to haul him upright. I'm sorry. Forgive me. I loved you. I was blind. Bet. Please. I stood up from my seat, buttoned my jacket, and smoothed my skirt. I looked at him, the man who had murdered me in another life, the man who had traded his soul for gold paint, and felt a profound, beautiful emptiness. I didn't say a single word. I didn't glare. I didn't smile. I simply turned my back on his screaming, taking Ash's hand, and walked through the heavy oak doors of the courtroom into the bright, warm California sun. 2 years later, the Dolby Theater in Hollywood was bathed in brilliant, golden spotlights. The 98th Annual Academy Awards were in full swing. Inside the grand auditorium, 3,000 industry leaders, international directors, and legends sat in the velvet seats, cheering as the presenter stepped up to the podium, opening the golden envelope for Best Actor in a Leading Role. And the Oscar goes to. The presenter smiled, looking directly into the primary camera lens. Ash Olivier for The Last Horizon. The auditorium erupted into a thunderous, standing ovation. Ash, wearing an immaculate black tuxedo, stood up from his front row seat. He didn't look at the cameras. He didn't look at the gold statuette on the stage. He turned around, pulled me into his arms, and kissed my lips deeply in front of 80 million viewers worldwide. Thank you, Bet, he whispered against my ear, his voice rich, steady, and filled with a love that had survived 2 lifetimes. Thank you for finding me. He stepped up to the stage, accepted the heavy gold statuette, and stood before the microphone. He didn't launch into a self-absorbed speech about his grassroots struggle. Didn't brag about his talent. He held the statuette high, his dark eyes looking straight down into the front row at me. I dedicate this award. Ash's voice resonated clearly through the hall, to Bet Colbert, the woman who saw a boy standing in the rain, gave him a home, and taught him that the only gold worth having is the kind that doesn't melt in the sun. The applause was deafening, filling the grand hall like a wave of pure light. Meanwhile, 500 miles away, inside the stark, gray TV room of the high-security state penitentiary, a man in an orange jumpsuit sat on a cold concrete bench, a mop resting against his knees. It was Emil Brando. His hands were rough and callous from cleaning prison latrines. His face was scarred from an inmate fight over a tray of cold food. He stared up at the small, cage-covered television mounted on the wall. On the screen, he watched Ash Olivier standing on the stage where Emil had once stood, holding the Oscar that had been stripped from Emil's hands, kissing the woman Emil had murdered. Emil reached out his trembling, dirty fingers toward the glass screen, trying to touch Betty's glowing face. A loud clang echoed as a correctional officer slammed a nightstick against the iron door. Brando, back to your cell. The floor in Block C needs scrubbing. Emil slowly lowered his head, tears dripping onto his stained orange jumpsuit, a quiet, ragged sob escaping his broken throat. He had won an Oscar once. And in exchange, he had traded away the only woman who would have loved him forever, leaving him to rot in the cold, dark silence of his own eternal winter.